What if the most boring photos changed photography forever? That's exactly what Stephen Shore did through his photography. He ignored dramatic subjects and technique. Instead, he pointed his camera at motel beds, pancakes, and parking lots, subjects critics called boring, yet his photos became iconic. At a time when color photography was dismissive as amateur, Shore used it to capture the everyday with quiet clarity. He helped making color photography legitimate in the art world, but why did he photograph things most people would walk right past? What did he see, is a question, in the ordinary that everyone else missed? In this video, we'll break down how Shore's radical commitment to the mundane, his use of color, his deadpan framing, and his unique way of seeing the world changed photography. And of course, we will see what we, me and you, photographers can learn from his approach. And today I'm going to be featuring this massive book. Uncommon Places is one of his most famous books, and I think really a mark in his career. So without further ado, grab a drink, make yourself comfortable, and let's dive into the work of Stephen Shore. Imagine having your photographs bought by the Museum of Modern Art at just 14 years of age. That's how Stephen Shore's extraordinary journey in photography began, when Edward Steichen, the then curator at MoMA, acquired 3 of his images. However, the photographer wasn't chasing fame, he was chasing something deeper: the process, the experience, and ultimately a new way of seeing in photography. In the late 1960s, Shore found himself drawn into the creative whirlwind of Andy Warhol's factory, and for 2 years he immersed himself in its chaos and creativity, documenting everything: artists making work, people hanging out, and moments of stillness. Through this, Shore began to rethink what photography could be. As he later said, quote, "What I was interested in wasn't the decisive moment, it was the flow of time." This mindset led him to reject the idea of the perfect shot and instead embrace photography as a system that essentially was a way to experience and record the world as it unfolded. And so Shore's approach really transformed into what today many people, experts in photography, would call the snapshot aesthetic. And that is, this sort of casual and spontaneous and genuine look that photographs had. This was also a style that was embraced by people like William Eggleston and William Christenbury, whose work we've discussed extensively here on the channel. But there was something different about Stephen Shore, and that is that it was, I would say, a deliberate, snapshot aesthetic, and we will see why. This style came to life in his groundbreaking 1972 series, American Surfaces. Armed with a 35mm camera, the photographer traveled across the US, photographing everything from meals and motel beds to roadside signs and strangers. He shot flat, without a hierarchy or spectacle, capturing the ordinary with an unflinching eye. These images felt like a road trip diary. They were honest and unpretentious, and they challenged traditional notions of what a photograph could or should be. But Shore didn't stop there. Soon after, he made a more, I would say, dramatic shift. He slowed down, traded his handheld camera for a large format 8x10 view camera, and began working with intense precision. The result was Uncommon Places, a series that took the casual, vernacular style of American Surfaces and transformed them into something monumental. With its large-scale, meticulous composition and disciplined approach, Uncommon Places became a turning point, not just for the photographer's career, but for the entire evolution and acceptance of color photography as a serious art form. And this is the book I've been featuring throughout today's video, and it's also the perfect bridge to our next chapter, where we'll dive into how Shore's vision over color became his philosophy in photography. In the 1970s, many photographers avoided color altogether, believing it lacked legitimacy in artistic circles. Stephen Shore challenged this thinking head on. Rather than using color to glamorize or dramatize his images, he used it to document reality as he found it. And he consciously resisted the saturated cinematic look that was popular at the time. Instead, Shore let color flatten the spectacle, not heighten it. For the photographer, color wasn't a tool to manipulate emotions or impose style. It was a means to simply observe and record the world as it was. And I think looking at the color use and color philosophy of Stephen Shore, I think it really bases itself into two different concepts or two different words, and that is honesty and observation. So I actually think they're different, but ultimately they work together to produce what we see. He once said, quote, "Color has an emotional quality, but I wasn't trying to manipulate it. I wanted to observe it." And this approach is evident in his images, which feel quiet and unpretentious, using familiar, sometimes muted colors to show the world without artifice. He was less interested in creating a heightened, stylized experience, and he was more focused on capturing the subtle beauty and complexity of the everyday. Shore's technical mastery also played a crucial role. He learned to see not just as the human eye does, but as the film and paper would see, understanding that each film stock and printing process has its own palette and characteristics. This deepened his engagement and commitment with color as a form of visual truth and not just as a decorative element. Shore's approach then reminds me that color can be much more than just an aesthetic choice. It can be a way of seeing, a philosophy that honors the mundane and a stark reality of our world without needing to recur to a flashy or more spectacular techniques. So in a world obsessed with curated beauty and color stories, Shore's work stood out because it values observation over manipulation, showing us that sometimes the most powerful image comes from simply paying attention to the everyday, unvarnished world around us. In his influential book, The Nature of Photographs, the photographer explained that color can expand a photographer's palette and add a new level of descriptive information to the image. He noted that viewers are quote-unquote less stopped by the surface of a color photograph than a black and white one because color is how we normally see. This underlines his belief that color photography, when used thoughtfully, can communicate the experience of seeing in itself, bridging the gap between the world and our perception of it. And also, I think another important, element or idea in Stephen Shore's work, it was that the fact that he focused on being deliberately mundane. But I wanted to actually slow down and look at some of the photos in this book and discuss them so that we can see some lessons or notes that we can take from them. Take, for example, his image of a simple roadside diner. It's a quiet moment, but it feels loaded with a kind of stillness that invites reflection and asks the viewers to spend more time with a photograph. These are not traditionally beautiful or dramatic. There's no sweeping landscape or striking portrait. Instead, what the photographer does is to utilize the snapshot aesthetic to create a sense of immediacy, unfiltered, and familiarity with the scene, like a moment caught by accident. But the interesting thing is that Shore captures this snapshot feel with the discipline and rigor of large format photography. The images are carefully composed and technically precise, balancing what's spontaneous with control. So ultimately, this mix of ideas and tools challenges the old distinction between the serious and the amateur, showing that everyday moments can be worthy of the same careful attention. In the introduction to Uncommon Places, Shore talks about his way of seeing the world through the lens of photography, and I'll be paraphrasing here. But essentially he wrote, about how the world is full of photographic moments, how every scene can be framed, every detail observed and made to matter. In essence, his philosophy and work asks us to reconsider what deserves our attention. Instead of searching for the extraordinary or the dramatic, Shore finds meaning in what most people pass by without a second thought. It's a reminder that sometimes the most profound stories are found in the quiet spaces of everyday life. And now let's take a quick break to talk about what almost every photographer and videographer really dreads, and that is the loss of files, whether it is through corrupted hard drives, memory cards, or even accidentally, because you might make mistakes as you're human, you deleted the wrong files or folders. So how do you get those files back? Well, let me tell you about today's sponsor, Wondershare Recover It. Wondershare Recover It is a powerful data recovery software trusted by over 100 million users at this point. Whether you lose photos, videos, or documents from your SD card, hard drive, or even a USB stick, I know they're still around, Recover It can help you get them back. It works for all kinds of files and supports nearly every device photographers use with a great recovery success rate, as you can see by their reviews. Here's how it works. Just open Recover It, select where your files were lost, and let it scan. You'll see previews of your recoverable files and can restore exactly what you need. So if you ever face a data disaster like accidentally formatting your card after a shoot or losing edits after a crash, Recover It is your safety net. So don't let lost files ruin your workflow or be the end of your projects, because Wondershare Recover It might be able to get them back for you. So as we've seen, it might work with photos, videos, and of course with a multitude of other formats. So whatever work you're doing, even if it is paperwork for university or for your job, it might be able to get them back. So, I would advise you to check it out if you haven't already, and I'd like to thank them for kindly sponsoring this segment in the video. And now we get to one of my favorite parts of the videos, or the video here, and that is, what can we photographers learn from all of this and from observing the work of Stephen Shore? Now, I'd say there's two very important lessons here, and the first is on slowing down in order to see more. And while some might interpret banality as emptiness and dullness, Shore's photos show us that by paying close attention, really taking the time to see the details, the scene unfolding, we can definitely find something of value. When you slow your pace, your eye starts to catch on the subtle changes, shapes, colors, and spaces that give an image depth. And all of this connects with the second takeaway I've taken from this video or his work, and that is to photograph with curiosity and not judgment. Shore photographed without irony, without drama. He wasn't trying to critique or sensationalize. He was simply curious about the world around him. That openness is something that I see in his photos, and they invite us to question our own intentions. So I think this has been one of the biggest things I've taken into my own photography, and I've asked myself these questions. Can you make an image without trying to impress anyone? Can you simply be present, observe with empathy, and let the photograph emerge from genuine interest? Or no? And in my personal opinion and experience as a photographer, I find that this can be quite challenging, but at the same time, quite freeing. The idea that you don't have to obey to a certain rule, a certain standard, a certain, path. And I think that's as well the freedom of photography, and that is what I take as well from Stephen Shore. And obviously his photography is somehow quite, or this style of photography is somehow quite dominant these days. We see loads of photographers doing their own thing in similar styles. So obviously his work was very important in that context, and that's how it changed. But it still doesn't mean that we can't look at it, and despite all the other images that we see that are quite similar, that we can't look at his work and take important lessons. So I think as well to reflect on this idea of being yourself and the freedom of following your own path and your own vision. That's also super important, at least something that I think about, or it made me think about. And I hope you enjoyed today's video. And I wanted to thank so much today's sponsor. Links to them will be down below. I really appreciate their support. But most of all, I want to thank you for watching and supporting the channel. It is quite a niche subject, this side of photography. So I always try my best to, bring something to the table that is not just talking about a photographer trying to bring something more. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts down below. Let me know other photographers, perhaps contemporary photographers as well, more active, that we can talk about within this same style. Perhaps I can acquire their books, whatever that might be. Let me know, and I'll for sure have a look. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. It really means a lot to me, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace. I hear that train come, it's rolling round the bend. I ain't seen the sunshine since I don't know